So, as Chris mentioned, we're currently going through Hebrews 11, the hall of faith. So we see all these people had faith because God is faithful when you dig into it. It's not because they were superheroes. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I don't think looking round at any of you, you've committed adultery and then killed the husband so you could have the wife. I don't think any of you have said to your wife, "Oh, she's my sister. King, please take care of her." I'm sure none of you have done that. And he did that twice, Abraham, so he didn't learn the first time. So it's not because of anything they've done. It's not because they deserved it that they are people of faith. And when you read through, it's all because of his grace and his favour for them, that their faith grew. And then Hebrews 12 starts like this. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So we have the unique advantage that we live on the other side of the cross. We can look to Jesus, who is the founder and perfecter of our faith. And as I look around at the Spartan crowds here, I can see that I see people of faith. Not because of what you've done, sorry about that, but I know your lives and some of you. It's nothing to do with you. It's all because of what Jesus has done, and it's all because he has been faithful, and we can look to him who is the founder, so he's the one who created our faith in the first place, and he is the perfecter. He is the one who will make us perfect as we go on. And we're also surrounded by our own cloud of witnesses, aren't we? So we can look around and look at examples of living a faith-filled life. And today we just asked 3 people to come up and talk about how God has been faithful to them and how that has grown their faith. So we're going to start, and I was told I had to do a Kermit introduction here with all the hands, but I'll have a go, shall I? So we're going to start with Kathy. So, Kathy, would you like to come up? What? I did it that way, sorry. So Kathy's going to stand up so she can not hold the mic at the same time. Yeah, that's fine. Go on.
As you can imagine, is that about the right position? Can you hear all my saliva? No, okay. Sorry, not very professional. I was thrilled when Paul asked me to do this, not. And really, it wasn't until this morning when I was reading the Psalms, and it was full of God rejoice with me. God, look how, everybody look, what an amazing thing God's done. I thought, this is really an opportunity to share with you just how amazing God has been and how kind. As Paul said, he's the founder and perfecter of our faith, and how he started to found his faith in my life. A few years ago, we went to foster. This is after we adopted Chloe, and so my baby. Anyway, but we thought we might have a go at fostering as well, and they really put the thumb screws on with you, and they go through your past history and how you were parented. And so she comes around and she asks all the questions. She asks Paul, and then she turns to me and she asked me loads of questions about how I was parented. And she just looked at me in shock, and she was like, "Oh my word, I would never have believed all that of you." She said, "You know that if we find children in that situation now, we remove them. We don't let children grow up. It's too harmful to let a child grow up in that sort of situation." And I was like, oh, because you don't realise, you don't feel sorry for yourself. But God hasn't made me the person that I was going to be. He's redeemed me. So this is a little section of my story of how he changed me and changed the course of my life and the person I was destined to be through the world would have made me. How can I start? Okay, first of all, he let me believe in him, to know that he was there. Not necessarily as a saviour, but a lot of people are doing kids' work recently and inviting people to kids' club. Well, I was invited to a kids' club down the road. One of the neighbours, she had a child of about my age called Caroline, and they went to a lively, healthy church, Elim Pentecostal Church, and they took me along to a kids' club. And I saw the life there. I heard about Jesus. We learnt memory verses for stickers. And as my family can attest, and Chloe can remember the potty covered with stickers, and I'll do anything for a sticker. And I believed, I realised that there was a God. And so that little bit was sorted out. And when some of the stuff was kicking off at home, and me and my brother and sister were sort of hiding in the bedroom, I can remember their younger brother and sister getting them together and saying, guys, all we can do is pray. So even at that age, God was starting to build faith in me. And at school, so the next sort of big milestone, I suppose, at school, if you're from a home like that, you do behave a bit weird, as I'm sure the teachers will attest. And so I got physically bullied quite badly. It didn't bother me. Looking back, it never particularly bothered me, because if you're hurting that much inside, the physical stuff actually doesn't particularly bother you. And I did make some friends, but they were from equally damaged backgrounds. And I think, and this is where I thank all the teachers in the room, I think the teachers saw that and they encouraged my parents to get me into a local Christian school, or one that had a lot of Christian teachers. And because I knew that if I asked God about stuff and prayed, he delivered. I prayed practically every night that I would get into this school that my parents told me I had to go to. And I did get into it. Past 11 plus got into it. And these Christian teachers invited me to a Christian camp. And there I heard the gospel. I heard that Jesus died for my sins, that I could have a personal relationship with him, that I didn't need to be responsible for my own sin, that he took the blame on the cross. And they did this diagram. They showed us and God and the chasm between us because of your sin. And they showed the picture of the cross in between, and that you could cross that chasm. And I believed, and I got saved that week. But I didn't go back to a healthy church. I said to them, what do I do now? And they said, go back to your local church and get stuck in and involved. Unfortunately, the church I went back to, I think was more of a social club, to be perfectly honest. I did that week buy my first Bible, and it's got a reading plan at the moment. So this is like 12-year-old me. So 12-year-old me started to read the Bible every night like I was told. But as I've just shown Chloe, I only got as far as day 28. And you can't do it by yourself without fellowship. So I really tried to get stuck in this church. I went and helped at all the jumble sales with all the adults, this little 12-year-old kid. I got involved in the Amateur Dramatic Society, and I became a server. You know, if you go to one of these churches, there's someone there with a cassock and surplice who's lighting the candles and carrying the cross in front of the choir. I couldn't join the choir because I can't sing. You'll attest to that, won't you, Chloe? But nothing. Your faith just sort of like doesn't go out, but it certainly dies down. So for a few years, I was just sort of pottering on. Some bullying continued and things, even in the new school, because I was a bit weird. But God hadn't taken his hand off me. Got a Saturday job, and there was me and another girl there. We hated each other on sight. She went to the local school. Anyway, but we were both invited along to a local church, a healthy local church, where the congregation there loved Jesus and followed him and got excited about him and talked about him. And she got saved, and my faith came back online. We became good mates, and you know Vanessa, don't you? If you come round to my house, most of my rose garden she bought me. Every birthday she buys me another rose. We're lifelong Christian friends. It's wonderful. God has done a redeeming work in us. And anyway, this it's a thank you to everybody who's involved with teens, really, because this church had a healthy teens group. the couple leading it opened their homes to us, these waifs and strays from unsaved backgrounds, and they discipled us, and the Spirit filled us. We devoured every Christian book on their bookshelves, loads of autobiographies and really classic authors that they gave us access to. And God really changed me in those years. But I still carried the hurts I had almost as a badge. You know what it's like as a teen? You want to be special, you want to be different. And sometimes the only special thing about you is the damage. And it was tough love. They spoke to me about that as well. You know, saying that there's some things you're getting stressed about. They're actually not yours, not your problem, not your walk. So I learned a lot from their tough love as well as their open hearts and discipling love. What else can I tell you about those years? That's the other thing, is sometimes the things in my life God's changed in a moment. I can remember being prayed for as a young adult. Again, still hurt on the inside from some of the stuff that had gone on. And there was an altar call and I went forward. And the person who came to pray for me was not one of the leaders. You know, it was just somebody else. And I was like, no faith here for this particular person on the inside. Do you know what? I walked back from being prayed for and I knew God had set me free from so many things. So please, if you're thinking, can God use me to pray for somebody else? I'm going to say a bad word, no, but yes, he certainly can. He absolutely can. So please, it's him who does it. It's not the person who's praying for you that does it. But there are other areas in my life that God's changed very slowly. Even to this day, Heidi will tell you, me and her, we keep going through the boundaries book because my boundaries are a bit off. We're about to go through another book together. I've signed on to do the Freedom in Christ course because I know that God's carrying on the good work that he's found. He's a founder and he's a perfecter of my faith. Sometimes he's worked in a moment, sometimes he works slowly. And something else I want to say, it wasn't until recently, because you know I'm 60 now, in my 60s, can you believe it? But I look back and I know that the things that weren't so great were still his love for me and were perfect for me to have received. But I couldn't have said that at the time, and I would never say that to anyone else who's going through grotty stuff, because it would be cruel, wouldn't it, to say, well, this is God's best for you, because it certainly doesn't feel like it. And there is another person's sin involved, and they are responsible for that. But it's still, God is infinitely good. And I think what crystallised it this morning was I was looking for seeds for the garden. And Paul and I both like red hot pokers. And I looked at the instructions for these seeds I was contemplating buying. And it said that they might not come up the first year. It said these seeds require a winter chill to germinate. And I thought, that's what God's done in me. There is some fruit that I wouldn't bear in my life unless I'd had that winter chill of my childhood. So I just want to thank God for how he's been faithful to me in everything in my life. And I hope you can praise him and his greatness and his infinite power and majesty and love with me. That's all I want to say.
No notes, my word. Thank you, love. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I couldn't even do my little introduction without loads of notes. So next we got Mike Hamlin. You don't have to stand on the stage. Mike, you can use this mic if you want, or you can go up on the stage, up to you. Which way you want to do it. Really looking, I've read Mike's. Oh.
Okay. So I'm just going to start off by telling you a little bit about my past before I became a Christian. Better put these on, I can't see a thing. Okay. So when people hear about my childhood, they say it was abusive. Yeah, it was to a point, but again, it was just your childhood, you know. Around age 11 was when I had the realization that the only person who was potentially going to look after me was me, really, because stepfather was a bit abusive. When he drank, he liked to get a bit handy with his discipline. And as you can imagine, I wasn't the best behaved child, you know. So after one particular difficult night, I decided running away from home was better than staying there, really, you know. So I'm an 11-year-old boy wandering around the streets of Cardiff. Didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, and I ended up in Cardiff bus station outside Astley's, if any of you can remember that, talking to the winos. And believe it or not, the winos fed me. I'm an 11-year-old boy. They were begging me to go home, telling me streets no place for a young child. And then out of nowhere, believe it or not, Cardiff bus station was probably about 10 miles away from my house at the time. That's how long I'd walked that day. But then my sister just turns up to take me home 10 o'clock in the night. She didn't know why she went there. She just went there, and there I was. 5 times in all I ran away from home when I was a child. And then the 3rd time I ran away, I was around about 13 years old. I'd been on the streets for around about 2 weeks at this point. And after all my friends had gone home, I remember being in Roath Park, and it was hammering down with rain, like probably one of the worst you'd ever seen. And I managed to get myself into some bushes, and that night I was kept completely dry. Even though I'd been on the streets for 2 weeks, I was always fed. I always had clean clothes every day. For some way I managed to get new clothes, clean clothes. Nearly never went hungry, and I was, you know, it was just madness. And to be kept out of the elements moving forward, I started sleeping in the derelict church next to.
Yeah, Mike said that he might find this a bit too difficult at this point, so I'm going to continue. And if you want to take back over, Mike, feel free, but appreciate you coming up anyway. So I started sleeping in a derelict church next to Adamstown School, and a few weeks later, I was caught up to no good by the police. Between 11 and 14 and a half, I was in and out of the care system and living with my parents, getting arrested, so you get the picture of my life at that time. At 14 and a half, things got to breaking point, and I went to live with my father in Tredegar. I started at Tredegar Comprehensive and built a group of friends not dissimilar to the friends I had in Cardiff. I got a girlfriend who was not part of this group. She went to church, and so I found myself with my feet in 2 camps. An environment I always knew, and an environment which commanded respect, had rules, and had the love of God at the centre. At this point, I was seeing a counsellor who made me realise that I was no longer going to be able to keep getting into trouble and not to suffer the consequences. She would say to me, your choices and your will, and your choices are yours. You will choose to do the right thing or the wrong thing. And to be honest, what you choose doesn't matter. Just know you will have to deal with the consequences. And I asked her, how do you know what to do for the better? And she said to me, just ask, what would Jesus do? That was my last lesson with her. I'm just going to put an aside in here, because when I read this, I just thought, you don't know what your throwaway comments are going to do to people. Look at Mike's, I'm going now, look at Mike's path. Look at how he is. And God has made him into a man of faith. You're coming back up now.
Sorry about that. So up to that point that happened, and God was introduced in my life in that way. And then I was living with my father, and then I found out that my father had done something when I was when I was 9 years old, which threw everything, then bang, right out the kilter. So, right out the kilter. And I just felt like none of my parents, nobody wanted me at this point. So why would God? So there I am, turning my back on God and believing that it's all his fault. And for the next 25 years, just turn my back completely. But at this point, I'm 19 years old. I've got a baby. I've got a choice to make. What do I do? I'm making these decisions. Do I do it the right way or the wrong way? So I decided I was going to forge myself a career in sales. That's what I did. Mostly all legal. Yeah, and having to work. So for the next 25 years, I just did things my way. My way was the right way. And yeah, I always believed in God. I always believed that there was a God, but I just never believed that I was part of his special chosen people who you see walking around with big smiles on their faces and all of that. That wasn't for me. That's not my part. You know, I'm not in that book, so to speak. And then if I fast forward 25 years, my wife, she's going through her journey becoming a Christian. And I know there's a God, and I've got nothing good to say about him. I've got nothing good to say about anything. And as she's going through her journey, getting ready to be baptized, I had this dream. And God spoke to me and said, look, support her, don't be negative. If at any point in time you want to be negative, just shut up and listen. So all you have to do is just shut up. Just don't speak. And all I really wanted to do was just rip it apart. I didn't want her to be having anything to do with it. Why should she when I can't, if you understand? Do you know what I mean? But then one thirsty Thursday, a bottle of wine in the kitchen, Rian was going through a testimony. And again, I just wanted to just to spoil it. Just go, look, none of this is for you. But I didn't. I just spoke to God, and I said to God at this point, you know, I can see why you want her. I want to see why. Yeah, I can see why you want her, but just don't do what you've done to me. And it's at that point, that's when he turns around and tells me, if I really... That really turned my back on you. Let's have a look back at what happened. I'm on the streets. I'm outside Astley's with Winos. What's the first thing you think of? Well, they're kidnapping him, you know, young little boy. But no, they fed me. God's work. They looked after me. God's work. I end up sleeping in the church, keeping out of the elements. He was always there. Kept me warm, kept me safe. Guided me. Chose people that you would never think of to protect me. I didn't have one hungry, as you can see, you know. Still, guys, when you have that realization, that's why I love him. That's why my faith has been built every single day. It's because he showed me love. For 25 years, he showed me patience. God, I've sinned and he's forgiven. Just never let you go, guys. And today is about faith and how do you faith. And Paul asked me, how do you think God is going to be faithful to you moving forward? Well, for the last 45 years, he's always been there. So why would he stop now? It's just going to build. And if we think about, he said, as long as your faith is as small as a mustard seed, everything is going to be okay. He's got all the faith for us. All we just have to do is be there and just say, just keep our eyes on him when those bad things are happening. And they were pretty bad things. Don't forget, there was a lot of good things as well. But all those good things was him as well, not just protecting you in the bad. And as long as our faith is, as small as a mustard seed, we'll just be there to take care of the rest.
Oh, I'm gone. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Kathy. I know both of you, that was hard to do, and it's raked up some stuff, so I really appreciate you doing that and sharing, your life and how good God has been through it all. Despite everything, he is faithful. And last but not least, we have one of the elder statesmen of the church, Alistair, who's going to come down and give his testimony. I'm going to get a chair for Alistair, because like me, he's got dodgy knees. So, there's hundreds of chairs there. There we go. Never mind, eh? And I've got my stick with the hook ready to pull him off when he's... I'll give you 15 minutes, Alistair. I told Alistair 10 minutes, so I knew he'd go over, but But he said to me this morning, the first thing he said to me is, I don't know, I'm going to fit everything in 10 minutes. just grab me when my time's up.
Thanks. I've got these notes here, not to help me remember, but to stop me from digressing, so that I keep, 80-odd years of Father's goodness in 15 minutes now. Tell you this story. Church in Scotland had a new pastor. He was a great lad. He was really good. But his preaching would go on too long. And he'd meet with the elders, and I'll do what you say. But once he got into the pulpit, he got going. After the latest meeting, it hadn't made any difference. And one of the elders, in desperation, at the back of the church, took his Bible and he threw it at him. It didn't reach the pastor. He was in full flow. It hit one of the ladies at the front, one of the pillars of the church. And she collapsed, got up, and as she went down for a second time, she was heard to say, "Oh, please, hit me again. I can still hear him." You might have to throw things. Right. 3 girls in a mining family up in Durham. Each left their home and went down to get employment in London in service. One of them, the oldest one, enjoyed it so much she emigrated to Canada and worked for years in the family of a doctor. We used to get food parcels from them in the wartime. Second one, met a fella, Scotsman, Jock Johnson, got married, stayed the rest of her life down there. Third one, met a fella and became pregnant, and that was my mom. And he said to her, "Look, make the arrangements, I'll marry you, go get the church and everything." So she did, and she turned up. He wasn't there. He'd either disappeared into London or gone back to Ireland, where he came from. Now, to her credit, she didn't go for an abortion, which would have been illegal in those days and dangerous. So, in shame, she came back to Durham, to the Pitt village, Blackhall, and had me. The problem was I wasn't a girl. And I'm told she handed me back to the midwife to say, If only he'd been a girl. So she went off. Oh, I don't remember. I was so young, I didn't miss her. And I was looked after by a brother and sister. The sister, who never married, was the lass who came back from Canada to look after my granny, who died before I was born. The brother, he'd had polio as a lad, and he'd survived it, but he had a limp, and one leg was shorter than the other. His parents had tried to keep him out of the pits, but what was it? He had a taxi service in the villages going down to Hartlepool. After the 1926 strike, he couldn't run a taxi. People couldn't afford buses after that. And he went down the pit and he suffered. He had to walk miles down the pit, and he would come home and bathe his foot in water. Now, there's a brother, there is a sister, and suddenly this little lad is dumped on them. What do? They don't really want him. But there was one person. Granddad. And he'd just got retired from the pits, and he taught me to read and write. He'd read me stories, and I'd get my ABCs out, and he would tell me how to spell. And the other thing, he'd take me to the allotment. And he'd feed me vegetables. I mean, we wouldn't wash them, just rub them, and I ate them. And there was one thing happened that I used to laugh about until I realized the seriousness of it, and understood that there was I, a little lad, and Father was watching over me. We had a well in the garden, and he had a barrel half cut down, filled it with water out of the well, and put a sack of horse manure in there, which we got from the pit ponies at Bank. One day, I hitched myself up onto the edge of the barrel, and I can remember saying, "Look, Grandad, I can see," and I meant a sack of manure, but I didn't say that because I fell in. And all he saw in the greenhouse was a little pair of wellies. And he rushed out, straight across the garden, never mind the paths, and he pulled me out, smelly, awful. But I realized later, if I had breathed into my lungs any of that water, if I'd swallowed any of that water, I don't think I'd have survived. I mean, it was full of bacteria from the horse manure. So anyhow, I grew up in this house, not really wanted. Went to school, managed that. I was about 10, I think, 10, 11, and a couple of Cliff College evangelists came to our chapel. One was the son of a Westmoreland farmer. The other one was a bit better spoken than him. Now, I went to the children's meetings, I would say 10 or 11, and I also stayed to the adult meetings. Don't know why. I didn't enjoy it. I came under such conviction of sin. Oh, it was terrible. And I would say to myself, I'm not going back there again. But every night I would stay on, and God was speaking and working through me. I didn't go forward. I didn't want people to see me. So you lock the bathroom door and you pray the prayer of repentance. Interesting thing, my birth mum, she went forward. She got saved. It was lovely. But then I think I was 12 or 13, and she met this fella. He was a painter and he worked at the pit. She worked in the pit canteen, and I didn't like him at all. And she wanted to marry him. I didn't want to go and live with them. I found out later he had kids as well, and gosh, that would have been terrible. And again, I felt rejected. I felt Mom had left me. And unbeknown to me, what I considered normal, this rejection, was going with me all through my life. Let's move on. Yes. Went into the sixth form, reasonable set of O-level results. Spent 2 years in the sixth form. I didn't work. I honestly didn't know how to work. End of my upper sixth, I got my physics, I failed my chemistry, I failed my biology. I wanted to leave, go down the pit, get a job, get some money. Mum and Dad persuaded me to stay on. So I stayed on, and coming up to the upper sixth that year was a group of chapel lads. And it was totally different. They started asking me out to the youth meetings, so I went. And, it was great. And my faith began to grow in a way that it just hadn't. I think it was about the May or the June. The minister said to me, "Alistair, I'd like you to give your testimony." All right, I said, a bit reluctantly. And for the week before, I worked on this one sentence, and I was going to go and say this one sentence. And I went in that Saturday night, and I sat at the back where I could stand up, say the sentence, sit down again. There were 2 others, and they went to the pulpit at the front, and I was horrified. I panicked. The first lass who went up was saying things, and bless her, she fled in tears. The lad went up, and he spoke, and then it was my turn. Now, I've witnessed 2 earthquakes in my life. One, the epicenter was here in Wales, and when we were in Northamptonshire, I was sitting in someone's house, and I felt the chair shake. Second was that night, because I got into the pulpit, and I was hanging on to the pulpit, and it was going up and down. It was doing that, honestly. I don't know what I said. It wasn't the sentence that had gone long ago. But a few days later, the minister came to me and said, "Alistair, I think you've got a call to preach." And so I became part of the Methodist circuit of local preachers. The man who mentored me, lovely man, his father had been a Welshman, pitman, who'd come up to Durham to work in the pits. He was headmaster of a junior school. Academically, I stayed on. I got the biology. Results were still miserable. The universities I had applied for got no reply. And they dropped on the floor through the letterbox one day a letter from a Scottish university inviting me for a place on their science course. Didn't know the place existed. It was a 4-year course, so yeah, I went. Nobody else would have me. When I got there, had I been at an English university, I'd have gone to the Methodist Church, I'd have joined the METSOC, went to St Andrews. There were no Methodist churches there. I joined the Christian Union, and there I met Anglicans, Baptists, Presbyterians, Church of Scotland, Episcopal Church, Free Church of Scotland, the Wee Frees. There was a whole lot, and my mind was completely changed because I was finding people who had thought and approached worship differently from me, and it was just brilliant. It really was, and it was good. I struggled in the first year, went back after 2 resits, and I was useless. I really was awful. And then, one night, I'd heard that some of my mates had gone to the science reading room, so I thought, all right, we'll go along, because I tried to work in my digs. Went there, tables, dozens and dozens of people, bookshelves all around, and you had to sit quietly, and if you didn't sit quietly, people would stamp their feet in disapproval. And I had to take the discipline of sitting there while, you were working. I began to improve. The prof used to teach genetics, and he was wonderful because he could take you, and this was in botany, this was unsexy botany, not zoology. He would take you to the frontiers of science, and you knew you could go into the labs or in the field, and you'd do something new. And he invited me offered me a place on the honours course, and there was only about six of us, and so I said yes, and it was great. And come on, I'm not going to get very far. End of my third year, Dad died. I knew he was unwell, but I didn't know how ill he was, and I got a letter from Mum one day saying he'll never walk again, and I thought that was a shame. And he'd been off work. He hadn't been down in the pit for about 6 months. And I got a letter the next day saying, come home, Dad's dying. So I went home, and I was due to go to the Orkneys and do some plant work, and I just couldn't go. But anyhow, I went back in my fourth year. Mum didn't want to stay at Blackhall. I was quite happy to stay in Durham. I'd find a job, had to be teaching. My only experience of teaching was 2 weeks at a primary school in Hartlepool, where most of the kids had failed their 11 plus, and I had to teach everything, but everything, and I'd never stood in front of a class at all. I had to teach music. I can't read music. I mean, these things, I can't read them. I don't know what they mean. But one of my colleagues there would play the piano, and I would lead them in singing. But I survived. And in that fourth year, I was daft enough to apply for heads of departments. Crazy. And I got little in the way of response. One job I applied for, and you put your prof as your reference. And he came up to me one day and he says, I think this is yours, Mr. Watson. And it was a letter saying how I was completely unsuitable for the job because I had no experience. It was addressed to him. They got the names mixed up. But eventually I got a job, and I'm going to stop here, I think. Yeah, I got a job down in a place called Camberley. So Mum was near to her sister, and I started at the grammar school. The head of department asked me for coffee a week before term began. Her father had a heart attack or stroke, and I had to take over the department on a fortnight's primary school teaching. And I think just one thing. There was this lass in the sixth form came to the Methodist Church, the youth group. Jeanette insisted on being called Nettie. Now, Nettie in the northeast is the toilet at the bottom of the yard next to the coal house. For the life of me, I couldn't call her Nettie without bursting into laughter. She was, and I daren't tell her. Anyhow, it would go on to this other girl who went to do a nursing training into London, into Hammersmith. And I thought she was gorgeous, and I thought she had a boyfriend, and I thought I was way out of her league, because there was the family department store with the furniture business and the funeral, and that was Judy. But come on, I've got to leave it here. One thing I would say, I've said all this. Well, no, it's more. All right, don't laugh. I'm trying to finish. God is working in our lives in a way. I mean, others, you've said this before, haven't you? You don't realize it. And the other thing to say that I want to say is, and this would lie in the future, as we wanted to be involved in all God was doing, we had to move from fellowship to fellowship. It was an awful time. And we had our wilderness years. And God was working in there. Father was working in there. And finally, when we came to Wales, and I think some of you know why we're here, it was the death of our youngest daughter. Judy said, we'd been to this church where it wasn't quite right, so she said, we'll go to Hope. I said, nah, it's a big building, big congregation, and it was locked down. So when we arrived, came in through the doors, there's about 20 or 30 of you sitting here, all wearing masks. I had no idea who it was. I could have passed you in the street and wouldn't have known you. But this is our home. This is where it's safe for us. This is where God is working. Now, let's finish with a favourite quote of mine from John Piper. And it's just to remind you, the tough things you and I meet, the heartaches, the disappointments, the setbacks, Father is able to work in them for our good. This is what John Piper said. If you live gladly to make others glad in God, your life will be hard, your risks will be high, and your joy will be full. There you go. So you're all going to face it. I hope you have 80-odd years with it. It's wonderful. I mean, we're here. What could be better? Well, except Judy's not here. But God's working, and God's working here. And, sometimes I think, I just want to go to glory. Part of me wants to hang around with you lot and see what happens.
Thanks, Alistair. We'll have to have part 2 and part 3 and part 4 some other times. But God is good. And yeah, I was reminded of Paul, isn't it? It says, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And that's where I guess Alistair is at the moment. But I'm going to shut up. Thank you, everybody. God is good. He is faithful. I'll hand over to Chris.